Welcome, welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So thank you. So we had completed this coming week's parsha, which is just Chukat, and we had done all the Rashis on it. So of course, when that happens, we go back to Torah Temimah and continue with Torah Temimah, which is just going according to the order of the Torah. And of course, we're on to Parshat Noach, and we're discussing these place names that are mentioned by Noah's descendants in here early on in Genesis. And the rabbis, because these names, these places had changed their names, the rabbis in the Talmud try to identify them by their current name. So they'll tell you, what that original name was in the Bible and what that name is nowadays. Um, it makes me sort of try to think and meditate what was the purpose, what were the rabbis really trying to accomplish here, and at least on one level, I imagine they were trying to show how realistic the Bible was. The Bible was actually talking about these particular places, and there might be certain implications about these place names. But certainly the idea that, even though I know I push hard to look at the Bible in a non-historical kind of way, there is obviously some sense that when the rabbis are doing this kind of thing, that there is a level of history to it. And of course, I have also said that perhaps we can call it historical fiction. I don't know. But I really feel, even if the word fiction is probably anachronism with regards to the Bible, nevertheless, literary, no question about it. It is definitely literature. So, moving on. Yatsa Ashur. So let's go back to the verse that we're looking at here. Okay, we'll go back a little bit further to here, right? So we had actually finished this word Shinar. We were riffing on that, right? And we're talking about Nimrod, and one of the first great leaders, but in a very negative kind of sense, in the sense of, seeing himself as being this emperor or this great king, etc. Min min haaretz, so from this, go on, sorry. Hahi, from that land, Yatsa Ashur, Ashur went out. Okay, or well, yes. When we say go out, uh, we're talking about trying to think of the right term that I might say about this. Developed, maybe Assyria developed. That might be a good translation. Vayiven et Nineveh, I think we're going back on Nimrod now. He built Nineveh, ve'et Rehovot Ir, and Rehovot Ir, these are these cities, ve'et Kalach and Kalach. So let's see if there's any. Yeah, okay. So here we go. So Yatsa Ashur, Ashur, Assyria, and I'm going to stick for the time being with developed. Tana Rav Yoseph, an Amora, a teacher in the Talmud, mentioned of the Talmudic period, after the year 200. Uh, Rav Yoseph taught Ashur zu Silika. This is Seleucia, right? And I looked up Seleucia, at least in Jastrow, it was kind of helpful. This is, of course, in Tractate Yoma. So the Ashur that's being mentioned there. So he says the great city and fortress in Syria, founded by Seleucus Nicator. So of course this was later on, but at any rate, that's at least why it's called Seleucia. And Torah Temimah is going to have to comment on this. Let's take a look here. So it's Yud Gimel here. So Iyen Parshat Dvarim. Okay, says look at the Parsha of Dvarim, Deuteronomy, Gimel Yud, meaning chapter 3, verse 10. Salcha. So there it mentions, or Salecha, Ve'edrei. So these are two place names mentioned in Deuteronomy. Tirgum Yerushalmi, the Yerushalmi Targum reads Silyuka. Silyuka. So look at this here, right? So this is Salika, but there it says Siluka. V'nir'eh ein ze Salika. We should be careful not to confuse this with Salika, even though they sound so similar. So similar. Yeah, and the Salecha, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but Eretz Israel, it's in the land of Israel. That's where Salecha is. The Eretz Ashur Rechukah Mimenu, and Assyria is actually quite distant from the land of Israel. Samuch leBabel, much closer, joining next to Babylonia. Vehine, and behold, or look, afal pi de lo havai az irzo. So he's going on to a different comment now. He's saying, despite the fact that this city of Salika didn't exist at the time that they're talking about here in the Torah, katav kra al shem ha'atid. So it's saying that Scripture wrote regarding the future. In other words, Assyria didn't exist at this particular moment right after Noah, although it's saying, so that's maybe Yatsah is a good one. Maybe Yatsah saying eventually developed might be a good way to translate it, might support that okay? Well, the point is that Scripture was writing regarding future time prophetically. Ien Ketubot, he says, Vide, check out the tractate Ketubot, page 10b, Uma shekatavti la'el, and what I wrote above, but Parshat Bereshit, when I was discussing the Parsha of Genesis, the first Parsha, the Pasuk with regards to the verse, Hu halech kidmat Ashur. So there's a mention of a river, right? Possibly the Tigris or the Euphrates, and there in the Torah it says it goes on the east of Assyria. And there again, Assyria didn't exist at that time. But the Torah is still talking about, at least a time, I'm assuming, when the Torah itself was being written. And it mentions Assyria, even though at that time it didn't exist. But people reading the Torah would understand that's what they're referring to. They're referring to that particular river because that's what it's called during their own time period. So, going on. Et Nineveh. So there we go on to Nineveh. That's right here, right? Actually, yeah. Even et Nineveh, et Rehovot Ir, et Kalach. Et Resen, Bein Nineveh, Bein Kalach. It goes on to say, and Resen, another city, Bein Nineveh, between Nineveh, Uvein Kalach, and the city of Kalach. Right, there's Kalach, right here, right. Kalach, Hi Ha'ir HaGdolah, that is the great city. And we're going to see this is ambiguous. Okay. At any rate, we'll go on, right? Et Nineveh, so Nineveh, etc. Tana Rav Yoseph, again, our Rav Yoseph is commenting. Nineveh, Kemashma'a. So that's the city. We know it's called Nineveh now too. That's the city. Rehovot Ir, and how about the Rehovot Ir, this place they're referring to? Zor Prat de Mishan. So nowadays, during Rav Yosef's days, it's called Mishan, Euphrates of Mishan, and Kalach, Zoprat de Bursif. That is Euphrates of Bursif. Take a look here. Ushnehem, and both these lost cities, Nikrain al Shem Hanahar, their basis like Stratford on Avon, right? So they're on the basis of the river Prat of the Euphrates, She'over B'tochan, because Euphrates goes in between. It passes in the midst of each one of these cities. So understand that the significance of mentioning the river is because civilization, as Abba Eben comments, I'm sure he's not the first one to say, depends on a reliable source of water. That any civilization, any city, right? Civilization being the life in the cities, has to have a reliable water supply. And of course, the river here in this case, providing a water supply that's reliable, the city could exist at that particular time. But I think sometimes because we depend so much on plumbing and stuff like that, we don't realize just how dependent we are on that reliable water supply and how our very existence in these metropolises, etc., is dependent on the fact that we have plumbing and how these things, how significant plumbing really is, and the fact that it's based on a reliable water supply. So onward. So this is actually for the next verse. Let's take a look. And we're now in verse 12, right? So just commenting on this. Right. So this is Ve'etresin Ve'nive Ve'chalach. We read this verse, but that's why we're going to see this here Agadolah, right? But before we get to that, Ve'etresin. So again, Rav Yoseph seems to be our expert, our resident expert on explaining these cities mentioned in the Torah and what current cities are called, that they're now called. So again, Tana Rav Yosef, Resef, Zo Aktisfon, Aktisfun. That is a city nowadays, in his day anyway, that was known as Aktisfun. Let's take a look at the comment. He b'medinat Pras. So that actually is in Iran. It's in Persia, Aktisfun. Shekain beGitin, because we see that in Gitin, Vav Aleph, page 6a, me Aktisfun leve Ardashir, from Aktisfun to the city of, or it literally means house, but Be'ad Rashir, and it just, again, I believe it's talking about an inhabited area. Ume'ad Rashir la'Aktisfon. In other words, so possibly a person traveled from Aktisfon to Be'ad Rashir, and from Ad Rashir back to Aktisfon. Okay. Mashma, so it suggests Shem Shesmuchim He. So there it's being suggested that these two places are close to one another. They're contiguous. For Ardashir he bipras, and we know that the city of Ardashir is in Iran. So because Ardashir is in Iran, in Persia, so, and since they have a verse that suggests that Aktisfon is close by, we can infer that Aktisfon is in Persia as well. Uve Eruvin Nun Zayin Bet, in Eruvin, the tractate Eruvin, page 57b, Ita B'nei Aktisfon, they talk about B'nei Aktisfon. So, V'ulai Tzarich, so let's see, Akistafon. Forgive me, I read this wrong, right? So it talks in Eruvin about this place called Akistafon. And it's possible that it's a corruption of Aktisfon, of Aktisfon. V'sofrei divrei hayamim, he says, and chroniclers, right, people who write history, so to speak, right? Maskirin, they mention Ir Paparas, they mention a city in Persia, Beshem Ketizifun. So there's a city Ketizifun that apparently chroniclers mention. B'itachen, it's quite possible Shehi Aktisfon, that it's one and the same. It's simply a different version of Aktisfon. So just, not necessarily that these are deep literary statements here, but trying to identify various places going on. Hi ha'ir hakdola. So that's the sentence here that seems ambiguous, right? It says, ve'et bein Nineveh uvein Kalach. So he also developed a city called Resen between Nineveh and Kalach. Hi ha'ir hakdola. That is the great city. So what are we talking about, right? Which city? So here we go. Tana Rav Yosef, again, next one, forgive me. Ira Kadola, that is the large city. So this is not stated in the name of anybody. It's simply a statement in the Gemara. Also, this is all in Yoma, in the tractate Yoma. Eini Yodea, I can't say Im Ninveh ha'ir ha'gdola, if in fact Ninveh is the great city, Im Resen ha'ir ha'gdola, or are we talking about Resen, right? Let's just take a look at the sentence again, right? So it says, Resen between Nineveh and Kalach, Hi Ha'ir Agdolah. That's the big city. So it sounds like we're referring to Resen. Let's take a look here. Okay. Tet Zion. What he's trying to say is, Al Maka'eh halashon hi ha'ir gdolah. In other words, it's saying, what is this statement, this parenthetical phrase, that is the large city, that is the great city? What's it referring to? Is it referring to Resen? It certainly sounds like it could be Resen. Or is it, in fact, Nineveh? So we're going to see. Heve Omer. So I have to say, Nineveh hi ha'ir ha'gdolah. Right? So, sorry, going back a little bit. I need to go back a little bit. Keshehu Omer, when it states in Jonah, in the book of Jonah, chapter 3, it states, V'ninveh haita ir gdolah. It says emphatically there, Nineveh was a grand city, a great, great city. Heve Omer, I would infer then, Nineveh hi ha'ir gdolah, that Nineveh is actually the great city, not Resen. That's a clarification. See, so there's no Torah Temimah there. Okay, so yes. Uh, forgive. All right, I'm going to do the best I can with the next little piece here. Okay, so here we go. Let's find the place here where we are. Okay. Here. Umitzrayim. So another one of Ham's sons. Umitzrayim yalad et Ludim. He sired Ludim, ve'et Anamim, the Anamim, ve'et Lahavim, and Lahavim, ve'et Naftuchim, and Naftuchim. Okay. Ve'et Patrusim, and the Patrusim, ve'et Kasluchim, the Kasluchim, Asher Yatzu Misham Plishtim, from whom emerged the Philistines, ve'et Kaftorim. Kaftor is a name that we call Crete, and I believe that both the Philistines, that the Philistines rather, are said to have come from Crete. So, but anyway, so there are two different groups: Plishtim, Philistines, and Kaftorim, Cretans, I guess we'd have to say. Let's see. All right, let's keep going. A little more. Uchnan yalad et Sidon, and Canaan sired Sidon, Bechoro, his firstborn, ve'et Chet, and Chet, another one of his sons. Ve'et Hayevusi, and now we have the Jebusites, ve'et Emori, the Amorites, ve'et Girgashi, and the Girgashites. Ve'et Hachivi, and the Hivites, ve'et Ha'arki, the Arkites, ve'et Hasini, and the Sinites. So here we are here. Okay. Ve'et Hachivi. Lami nikra sham Hivi. Remember, we know that our sages like to sometimes look at names and actually interpret those names in other kinds of ways. Why were they called the Hivites? Amar Rav Papa, said Rav Papa, Shahayu to'amin et haaretz kechivya. So I need to look up the word chivya again, whether it means specifically just animals. In other words, they would taste the earth. They actually put the soil in their mouth, right? And tasted that soil. And that's why, and the chivya also do that. And I need to check and see what chivya are actually. Oh, here we go. Aramaic name. Thank you. Thank you, Torah Temimah. Kenachash. So chivya means a snake. That's what a chivya is. Let me put it in here. Okay. So that I'll know next time. And of course, do I remember now that I've seen that word before? Of course I do. Yes, of course. They used to eat, because a snake, of course, the head is on the ground and it's as if it's tasting the earth. So let's see here though. Kenachash, in other words, like a snake, shekol machalo afar, because all of its food is dust. V'rnotzono lomar. I'm not going to argue with that particular statement necessarily, but at least it looked like it was, right? V'rtzono lomar, and what he's trying to say is she'al yidei shehit'ima hayu hate'ima, that by means of tasting, the taste of the earth, right? Hayu yodim, they would then know umakirim, they would understand skulat haaretz, the the quality of the earth, right? Vet utfunata, and it's again it's similar to qualities. In other words, its properties. Ma ra'ui l'gadel ba. In other words, what was fitting to grow there. And we know to this day, right? Certain soils are alkaline, certain soils are acidic, and we know that there are also trace elements that can be very, very important in terms of how well any kind of plant thrives. And that's the idea here, is that they would actually taste the the earth, and they would then determine its alkalinity, its salinity, etc., the various chemical properties of the earth itself by tasting it, right? וכאין מה שכתוב בפסוק, uh, uh, it's and it's similar to what is written in the verse, Ele b'nei Seir, right? Uh, does look like Hachori. And these are the descendants of the children of Seir, Hachori, the Hurites. Can I guess? Yoshvei Haaretz, who dwelt in the land. And this is Sof Parshat Vayishlach. This is at the end of the Parsha in the book of Numbers, Vayishlach. Atu kule alma yoshvei rikiahem. And so the Talmud, in its delightful kind of way, says, well, in other words, here it's saying they dwelt in the land. And the Gemara's comment is, oh, you mean everyone else dwells in heaven? We got to mention that these people dwelt on earth, because otherwise we think they dwelt on heaven just like everybody else. In a sense, who else dwells? I mean, everybody dwells in the land. Why mention Dafka that they dwelt in the land, right? Ella shahayu. But the point is this, so the Gemara has the answer, of course, which is hayu bekiyim, but they were experts, beyishuvah shel eretz. Okay, how to, in other words, in terms of inhabiting the land, they were experts. Keep it going on. Shahayu amrim, because they were able to say, these particular people were able to say, Male kanezo lazayit. He says this particular reed's worth of land is good for olive trees. Yes, David.
So, I mean, essentially, are they saying these people were like had green thumbs? They were the great farmers? Is
Yes,
that? Yeah,
yes, that they were expert agronomists.
yeah. Okay. All right.
It's sweet, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and the way they did it, I mean, they didn't have instruments to do this, right?
Right.
They tasted it. They actually,
Yeah.
put the earth, a little bit of earth in there, a little soil in their mouth, and they would taste it. Look, I mean, to this day, we have people who understand the quality of wine. We have wine tasters and tea tasters, right? That being able to have very sophisticated taste buds and well-trained taste buds, you can tell a lot, okay, as to the quality of something, right? So they would say in this particular area, right, when it says kanezeh, it's referring to a reed, but it's talking about a measurement, right? Measurement of area. B'makom zeh, in this particular case, again, Torah Temimah is being very helpful here in terms of explaining certain expressions that are a little bit hard to understand, right? That in this particular locale, ra'ui legadel zayit. This is a good place to plant olive trees. Uvazeh gefen, this is a good place for grapevines. Uvazeh teinan, this is a good place for, I think, teina would be a fig tree. Okay. Ukiduma, similarly, they knew, they understood that the quality of the soil, the nature of the soil is very significant. Not just the matter of, we know sunshine and shade, all these factors go into whether a plant is going to do well or not. V'yein ma shekatavti sham, look and see what I wrote there. מה שנוגע במדרשות אלה לדina. Oh, interesting. He says, see there what I wrote as to the halachic, I think what he's saying is the halachic implications of these particular midrashim, right? That there's some halachic significance there. Ubichlal, and in general, miderech Chazal. Again, it's a stylistic issue, right? Our sages of blessed memory like to do this. Lidrosh shemot, right? To interpret names. Yein ma shekatavti la'el. Look at what I wrote above, ot tet, in note number 9. And of course, that's where he talks about it and how there's a verse that can be read in such a way where it talked about, the devastation that God instead, which is shamot or something like that, as opposed to shemot, right? Sounds so similar. That these names have divine significance in terms of, God being the creator and having created the world and naming these places in a way that is significant in terms of inhabiting the world. And we will stop here. Going to pop in an arrow so we know where to continue with God's help tomorrow. Continue here. And let's see what else I've got here. Just want to make sure I did everything that we needed to. Yes, right. Gosh, I could not think of Chivia being a snake or a serpent. Amazing. Okay. Finished with the share. All right. Anything else for the record?
Yeah, I don't understand all these cities like Nineveh and Mesopotamia and Euphrates and all the way into Iran. I thought that the Promised Land was all the way to Lebanon. And now, what's Iran doing? Persia.
Yes.
Why is God mentioning that?
Okay. So the thing is that if you know, in the narrative of the events that subsequently happened, Persia has a part to play with the history of the Israelites and these other places as well. The Assyrians do for sure. Nineveh is an Assyrian city. And of course, the Assyrians destroyed the northern kingdom. The Babylonians destroyed the southern kingdom, but the Persians were the ones, remember, under Cyrus, who brought them back. And so there's something very lovely and again literary in trying to sort of give a whole picture and to sort of let you know ahead of time what's going to subsequently follow. That there's a certain level of what we call foreshadowing in the narrative. So I appreciate the question very much, Arlen. It's a legitimate question. And so I'm going to.
And the Philistines were on the shore where Gaza was.
Yes, that is correct. Gaza is actually a Philistine name. What happened was they migrated from Crete and arrived on the shores of the land of Israel, the land of Canaan, around the same time. So, yes.
Where were the Amalekites then?
I think they were actually a descendant, would you believe it, of Esau.
Oh.
Yeah, they were even closer relatives.
And how about Edom?
Edom, again, that's another name for Esau, Jacob's twin brother. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. You can see that there are all these literary connections going on. Very beautiful. Yeah, I know. Is right. The more you study this stuff, the more you realize just how amazing it is, how sophisticated and brilliant it is. So I'm going to stop the recording with that.